Hello, welcome. I'm going to take you through a Remake JS tutorial. Remake JS is a framework that lets you make server-rendered web apps very easy to build. It lets you automatically edit data, be able to reorder data, be able to add data to your page, just adding a few data attributes, and it just makes it so quick to create a full web app. Today I'm going to show you very quickly how to create a Trello clone. So here we have a stack. We're going to be able to add items to the stack. We're going to be able to reorder them. We're going to be able to add new stacks. We're going to be able to drag items between the stacks, and we're even going to be able to reorder the stacks themselves. If you're wondering what this area is over here, it's going to show the data that's currently attached to the page. Right now there's no data found, so it's not showing any data, but this data is going to be very important for Remake because it's going to be the data that represents the data in the database. But we'll get to that more soon. Okay, so to start off with, let me show you what I have so far. This is just a standard server-rendered website. It's not really a web application yet because all it has is these three templates. You have the home template that renders the overall page, the app. It loops through all the stacks, and then it renders this template for each stack. And then it loops through, right here, it loops through all the tacks, and it renders this tack. If you're wondering what a tack is, it's these items right here, these gray items. The stack is this column, and then the pack is the whole page. This setup that we have here is part of a backend framework that you can use with Remake if you want, or you could use Remake with your own stack. But it has this config file here that'll just give us the title of the page and the route that's supposed to match in order to render this, this index file. So we have that set to the default route, and let's get started. One more thing to mention, if you're wondering where the data for this page is coming, where are we getting untitled pack, untitled stack, resurrect dinosaurs, blow up the moon, that's all coming from a simple JSON file right here called john.json. It represents the user John. It is a static JSON file, but Remake will be able to automatically edit it as we go on. But just so you know, we have the pack name here, we have the stacks array here, we're looping through the single stack right now and rendering its name at the top right here, and then we're rendering each of the tacks. So it's just a static JSON file. And we'll see how that changes down the road. By the way, all you need for using Remake with this backend framework is in this templates directory. You're not going to need to write any custom JavaScript yourself. Of course you can, you're not prevented from doing that by any means, but if you want to write an entire web application without touching JavaScript, you can. This Trello clone is going to involve a little bit of JavaScript because we need to be able to reorder things on the page, and for that we need to use a custom library, but for the most part you'll just be editing things in this templates directory. So let's start with the home page, and let me just show you basically how Remake exports data. So if we attach a special data attribute called data O-type, the O stands for output because it's outputting data, and we set that to object, and we save this page, and we go back to our app, we're going to see over here we get an empty object. This is all of the data that's being parsed on the page right now. So right now, since we attach this data output type of object, it knows that the entire page is wrapped in an object. For the next thing, let's export the data for the pack name. It'll become very clear very soon why we're doing this, because we're going to be able to make all of this editable very soon. So right now we need to make this an object because it's going to output a key value pair, And then let's create the key and the value by doing data output key, and then we're going to give the key a name. We're going to say pack name, and then we're going to set that equal to, we could say untitled pack here, but since that's what's coming from the data itself anyways, let's just put in data.packName right here. Okay, so this is what's coming from the JSON file anyways. Now if we refresh, we have pack name is equal to untitled pack, and that's what's being exported from the page because we attached an object type to this, and we're exporting a key of pack name and a value that's in the JSON file of untitled pack. It'll work exactly the same if we put in a string untitled pack in here too. That's exactly the same thing. If the page refreshes, we get pack name untitled pack. Okay, so how are we going to make this editable? We have this very simple attribute called data I editable. The I stands for input. Whenever you want to input data into the page, you use a data I attribute. So we're going to say data I editable, then we're going to put in the key name that we want to edit, and we're going to do that in camel case because it's inside of the attribute values, so we can use camel case so instead of dash case. So we'll say pack name, that's the key that we want to edit, that's this key right here, and then we're going to say how we want to edit it. So we're going to say text single line. And that's one of the few ways that we can edit right now. In the future, you'll be able to edit colors. You're going to be able to edit choices. There's going to be numbers, all kinds of options. Okay, let's go back to our app, refresh. And now if we click on Untitled Pack, we're going to get this inline edit area that comes free with Remake. You can make this inline edit area yourself if you want, but if you want to use the one out of the box, it's pretty nice. Now let's edit this and see what happens. It's not going to do exactly what we think, but if we save that, we'll see over here, the pack name does indeed change. And if we were to look at the data attribute on this, let's inspect it real quick, we'll see that the pack name key is set to the value of dogs and cats. So the value of the data actually changed, it just didn't update in the DOM. So let's figure out how to do that. So in order to do that, we're just going to create a watcher. So data-w, W stands for watcher. I know this is a lot to take in at once, but I swear it's going to get a lot easier very soon. It's going to make a lot of sense. So we're going to say data watch the key pack name. So any key that matches this, like this one right here, whenever that changes, this watcher is going to call a function that we just defined in here. So we could just put a random function in here if we wanted, or we can also use an element property. So if we just say inner text, that's going to set the inner text of this element to match whatever this pack name gets set to, and it's going to keep your the data in your DOM, the visual representation of your data, synced up with the backend data automatically, because it's going to watch this key and then it's going to update the inner text. So let's go back here. We're not saving data yet, so we reset to this untitled pack for now. If we open that up, we get our free inline edit area. If we say roses are awesome and we click save, now it's going to update the inner text because that data watch attribute is watching the key pack name, and it's setting the inner text of this element whenever it updates. So this is changing because the data input editable attribute is modifying the pack name with a single line input. If we wanted multi-line, we could put multi-line here. If we wanted a choice, we could say choice and then some choices over here. The choice attribute isn't implemented yet though, so for now let's just use text single line, and then that's going to be editing this key value pair, and then the watch attribute will update the inner text based on that. Okay, so that's the basics of there's only one thing we need to do to add in order to get a working web application, which is saving the data. So at the top level, on the parent component of the entire application, we're going to add a data O save attribute. And if we just kept it the regular data O save attribute, it's only going to save the data on the current attribute. So let's add a deep flag to that. And deep means I want you to parse all of the data inside of yourself and save that. And then we're going to just say default save. And by default, this is going to post all of the data in the app to an endpoint that is at /save. So it's just going to post the data to a /save endpoint. And since we're using the Remake JS full stack framework right now, that's all going to be handled automatically. We don't have to worry about that. It's just going to overwrite these JSON files for now. Okay, so let's refresh the page. And we've got untitled pack. Let's rename this to, I don't know, ladders help you get high places. I don't know what I'm thinking. But let's do that. It's going to change the pack name to that. And if we refresh, we're going to see it still stays there. And why is that? That's because the JSON file has been edited. The pack name is now ladders help you get high places. And so we're rendering something different when we get the data from the pack name. So that's the basic cycle. We've added right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 special data attributes that let you edit the data, attach data, watch data, and save data. And that is the basics of a web application. Okay, let's keep going. So right now we only have this data. Let's get some more data. So let's get the data for the stacks. So the first thing we're going to realize is that we're looping over some stacks here, so we probably want a list. So instead of an object, for this one, let's say data O type equals list. And now if we save that and this page refreshes, we're going to see nothing. I make this mistake every time. So we actually need to give this list a key so that it has a namespace in the parent object. Because you can't just put a list inside of an object, right? That list needs a key. So let's use this special data O key attribute, and we're going to say stacks. Okay? And then that's going to say, okay, now this parent element is a list, and it's inside of the parent object up here with a key of stacks. Okay, so let's save that and let's see what our data looks like now. Now we have a stacks key set to a value of an empty array. And that's exactly what we expected because we're setting this to a data type of a list. I probably should have named this array, but I named it list just to be more like newbie friendly. Okay, so we have a list, and that will wrap all of the data in the stacks. Now, if we go into the stack template, let's attach some data to this so that we have the data, the stack name for each stack. So next to this class attribute, let's put a data O type of object because we're going to export key value pairs from this element. And then let's say data O key, and we'll say name, right? And we'll say the name is going to be equal to the stack name. And that's the thing that's coming from the JSON right now. So we'll just render that as the data. Let's save that and see what's exported by Remake. And we'll see right now we have a single stack that has a name of untitled stack. And that's exactly true. That corresponds to the data. So let's make that editable. Very, very easy. Let's just use our editable attribute again. And what are we editing? We're editing a key called name. And we want to edit it with text single line. We'll save that. This page will refresh. And now we have the ability to edit this stack. And since we already have the save attribute at the top of our app, it's going to save all the data no matter what we set this to. So we'll say awesome stacks or awesome stack, and then we'll save. Oh, we forgot one thing. We forgot the watch attribute that's going to set the inner text. So we can see in our data, we actually did update it. And if we refresh the page, this is going to say awesome stack. But that's not a great user experience. You don't want to have to refresh the page in order to do that. So let's create a watch attribute, and it's going to be on this element. And this element is going to be able to tell that the data above it changed. So we'll say data w, so watch the key called name, and then set your inner text when that changes. So let's save that. And now when we edit this stack, we'll put a couple exclamation points. It's going to update there. If we refresh, it's already in the data. If we check our data.json file, everything's updated. Now the tags aren't there. They got overwritten because this data is now overwriting it. So let's get our tags back. So the first thing we want to do again is create another list, because each of the items under the stack is we're looping through it, so it probably should be an array. So let's say data o type, and we'll say list, and we got to give it a key. So let's say data o key, and let's call it tax. So that'll be namespaced under tax, and it'll be an empty array. So let's save that and see what that looks like. Okay, so we're kind of close to getting our tax back, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. Let's go into the tax template, and let's attach some data here. So here we want to say data o type, because we're going to export some key value pairs again. So we're going to say object, and we're going to say data o key, and then we'll say text. So a tag will have text, and we'll just set that to the text that comes from the JSON file. Unfortunately, our JSON file got overwritten, so it doesn't have any tags yet. So yeah, if we refresh this, we're not going to get anything. And just so we don't forget, let's also add that watch attribute, so that whenever this changes, when we are able to update it, the inner text will match it. And let's also make it editable while we're at it, because why not? We already know how to do that. So we'll say data I editable. What are we editing? It's a key called text, so we'll just paste that in there, and we'll do text single, or actually we probably want to have this be multi-line. So we'll say text multi-line. Okay, we'll save that. Now we don't have any tags rendering right now. Just as a quick way to get around that right now, let's just paste our old data back in our JSON file. And I think that might help us get around it. Yep, okay. So that's not something we'd have to do if we were more experienced with Remake, but for now it's a nice shortcut. So now we have a pack that's able to be edited. We have a stack that's editable too, and we have tags that aren't editable. When I clicked on it, it's editing the untitled stack, and let's see why that is. So I have this data I editable. I'm really not sure why this is happening. This is a bug with the app. I don't think it's a bug with Remake, but let's see. So text multi-line, data key text, data I editable. Huh. Let's refresh and just see. Huh. Oh, you know what it must be? I must have the, yep. So see, I have this editable attribute on the stack itself. So if you click anywhere in the stack, it's going to say, oh, I'm going to pop up the edit attribute. What we actually want this editable attribute to be on is the thing that that when you click it, it's going to pop up the inline edit area. So let's cut that out of there, and we can still attach the data up at the top level if we want. But let's just attach the editable attribute to the stack name div itself. And now if we click on the stack, that's going to be editable. And if we click on each of the tacks, those are going to be editable. And if we refresh the page, we can see it's all saved. I think that was all saved, right? I'm pretty sure. Yep. Yeah. Okay. I just got confused because we reset the data a minute ago. Okay, so now that's all working. We kind of have a working web application, kind of. We don't really have the ability to add data yet, though, so that's unfortunate. We can just kind of edit what's there already. So let's figure out how to add data. So I mentioned before that having things split up into partials is going to give us kind of a shortcut advantage. And what this backend framework for us will do right now is render these templates for us automatically if we attach a special remake attribute on the front end. So let's find this add stack, or actually let's find this add tack button. So let's go into the stack and let's look at this button. So we have this button here that has this class, and it has a plus icon inside of it. So that's this one. Let's add a special attribute to it called data input new. And as the first argument, we're going to give it the partial that we want it to render when this is clicked. So we're going to say tack. So what that's going to do is that's going to reach out to the backend. It's going to say, hey, do you have any partials that are named tack? It's going to say, oh yeah, I have this one right here. And then it's going to say, okay, render that and give it back to me. And then it says, okay, so the backend renders this index.njk file, and then it gives you back the rendered HTML, and then this data I new attribute says where to insert it. So we're just going to give it a selector called that looks for a class called tax, and we can see that's right here. So it's just going to look for the closest one that matches this, and that's where it's going to insert the rendered tag template. And that's as simple as it gets. That's how easy it is to add a new item. Hopefully. Let's see if it works. So we refresh. If I click this, we get a new item. Now, there is a minor problem with this item you might notice. It doesn't have any text in it when it starts out. So I can edit it and add some text. But of course, we don't want it to start with no text. How do we get around that problem? Well, inside of each partial, we can create a special data.json file, and the template will populate itself with that data automatically. So if we look at what the tack needs, we can see in these double curly braces, it's expecting something called tack.text. So let's create a valid JSON. Valid JSON file. We're going to say tack, and then we're going to say text, and then we'll pass in whatever string we want. So we'll just say untitled tack for now. And we'll save that. And now when we create a new tack, it's going to come with that default data attached to it. And let's do the same thing for the stacks. So if we want to be able to add stacks, let's go into the parent template. Let's find that button. So here's the button right here, add stack, and we're going to just attach very simply this data input new attribute. We're going to tell it what template do we want it to render, something called stack, and then where do we want to insert it? Into a selector, into a list that matches the selector stacks. So right here, that's the one it's going to find, this list. And so when we click this button, it should render this stack template and it should insert it there. We already know that we're going to need data for it because we saw, what happens when we don't have data. It just displays empty. So let's create a data.json file and let's see what it expects. So it's going to expect a stack.name, and then it's also going to expect down here some tags. So let's actually go into our JSON file and just grab this entire stack object, and we're just going to insert it as starter data for this stack. But it does need to be namespaced with stack. So let's wrap it in this, and we'll say stack, and then colon, and then I believe we can just do that. So let's try that. So now we have a stack that has a name, and actually let's like get rid of most of these tags and put in like untitled tag here, and we'll put in untitled stack. So this is really all we needed to do. We probably didn't need to copy and paste it. But let's do that. We'll refresh just to make sure. Now if I add a stack, boom, it renders it automatically with the data that we provided in the accompanying data.json file. And it knows how to render itself, and it renders it with the data we need. If we click this item, that's going to still work. If we refresh the page, it still works. If we rename this to something else and refresh, it still works. All the data is there. We're getting a little data overflow over here, but that's fine. Okay, so now we've got almost everything working. We've got the ability to rename the entire page. We've got the ability to add new stacks. We've got the ability to add new tags, new sub-items, but we don't have the ability to reorder them or move them to a different stack or reorder the stacks themselves. So before I go into that, I'm going to just hide this data area over here, this debug area, real quick. Go in here, say display none, and great. So now that's gone. So then now we have the full page to work with. We'll see if we add a bunch of stacks, we can scroll horizontally because we already took care of that styling issue. But we still can't drag things. So this is where we're going to have to do a tiny bit of JavaScript. And by a tiny bit, I mean a fair amount. So let's go into our index.js file. And I'm going to just go through this one at a time. I'm going to uncomment this and delete our other init there. So when we initialize Remake JS, so this is the init function, there are a few things we can pass in. We can pass in custom watcher functions. That's what's called when your watch attribute triggers. By default, it's going to set the property on the element, as we saw, but you can also pass in custom watcher functions. You can also pass in custom save functions. So instead of just defaulting to posting all the data to a /save URL, you can handle data in a custom way, add it to different objects or different endpoints. And then this is another thing that we can pass into init, which is add item callback. Now, this is going to be the callback that's called every time a new item is added to the page. For this one, we get the item element from the callback. We're going to set that to a variable called stack element, just so that we know what it's referring to. And actually, that should probably be inside of the if after we confirm that it is indeed a stack. So we say if the template name that we're rendering is a stack, which is the first, you'll remember that's the first argument that we pass to the data INew attribute is stack. So we know that the template name is equal to stack. Then we're going to say, okay, the item element that was added is the stack element. Inside of that stack element, we're going to grab the tags, right? So that's the individual, that's the list that contains the individual editable text elements. And we're going to pass that into a library called sortable. So we're going to create a sortable list using that parent list of tags. and we're going to group it under tax, and then on end, so whenever an element is dragged between different lists, and the drag ends, then we're going to call our save function, and we're going to just call our save function on the stack element, which will trigger the parent app save function. So that's a little bit complicated. And then so that's when we add a new element. So that's to make all of the tags sortable when we add a new element. But we also need to do it when the page renders. So we're going to just do the same thing here, except we're just going to get all of the tags list whenever the page first renders. And we're going to loop through them by converting the elements array-like thing into an array, looping over each one and making it sortable, and also grouping it under the name tags. And by grouping it under the same one for all of them, they're going to be able to have the same elements. So you'll be able to drag elements from one to another just by creating the same group. And then we're going to do the same thing on end. We're going to call the save function. And then the last thing we're going to do is make the stack sortable. So we're just going to grab all the stacks elements, and then and there's actually only one, so we're not going to do query selector all. We're just going to do query selector. We're going to pass that stacks list. So the stacks list is the thing that contains all of the stacks, right, in this horizontal list. And then on end, we're going to just call the save function. So what we're doing is pretty simple. We're just saying when you create a new item, if that's a stack, make sure all of its tags are sortable. And when they're reordered, call the save function. Same thing for ones that are already rendered on the page when you first render it. And then same for all of the stacks on the page. Make sure that list is sortable and group it under something different than tags, so that you can't grab a stack and put it into another stack. And then whenever that finishes moving, save it. Okay, so let's save this JavaScript file with a little custom JavaScript and go back to our app. And now we can add items. We can move these items, even if they're new, to different areas. We can grab a stack, we can move it over here, and since we're saving every time after we're moving things, I can refresh the page and everything saves exactly where it is, because we're serializing all of the data on the page and sending it all to the database every time. We can add new stacks. And if we go down here and we rename this and we drag this all the way over here, that just works. And we can refresh, and we've got a working web app. Now, like I mentioned, this isn't using real user accounts yet, but very soon it will have user accounts with Passport.js built in. And when you log in as a user, the data that you save on the page that you're on will be automatically attached to your user. So all of this will just work for any type of web app out of the box. You're not going to have to worry about creating user accounts, saving data, parsing data, editing data, adding new elements to the page. All of that can be taken care of for you almost automatically by Remake JS. Obviously, drag and drop is a slightly more complicated situation, so we needed to add a little custom JavaScript for that. But a lot of things were handled out of the box for us, even when we had to write a little custom code. And this is a pretty robust Trello clone where you can add all your own items, you can rename things, you can save the page. Yeah, it's pretty nice, and it only took us about a half an hour to build. I hope you like Remake JS. I hope you try exploring it. If you go to remakejs.com, you'll get to the main repository and documentation. If you scroll down here and you look at the annotated source code for a simple to-do app, I will explain line by line what Remake is doing, and it can be a quick refresher of how to build a simple web app with only 28 lines of HTML. Um, and most of the custom code is data attributes. And yeah, this is an example of a simple to-do app that you could download and play around with today if you wanted to start using Remake. Okay, that's it. You can follow me at twitter.com/Panfora. I live stream regularly. I do a lot of tutorials on Remake JS. I just did one yesterday. I'm going to do one again today. And send me a message there if you want. And I would love to hear your feedback and your ideas for the future of Remake. Thanks a lot, and I will talk to you later. Bye.